Hello and welcome to another edition of Monster Island Radio. I'm Ben and I'm joined by the newly married
Graham. Oh yeah, we said Godzilla, you're welcome if you want to drop in, in the evening part of it. But no, didn't actually respond to those requests.
The evening part?
Yeah, we didn't invite Godzilla to the ceremony.
Oh yes, yes.
I don't know if it was that which made them feel like, oh well, I just won't come at all then, or maybe they're trying to phase some friends out after the pandemic. They're trying to maybe move away from I haven't seen you for so long. Maybe this is my time to make an excuse and not. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Weddings are weird, but no kaijus at the wedding, despite whatever. It's, this is all personal.
What a shame. So yeah, we're back again, and it happened again. We had another big unplanned hiatus.
We did.
Which is, sorry everyone. we didn't want to do that. For me, I had quite a challenging year with a big house move, and all of my recording equipment was in storage for a big portion of it, along with the rest of our stuff.
And I was talking about Godzilla most of the time, but it just wasn't being recorded.
Yeah, basically. I should have just rented some equipment or something where I was staying, or recorded on my phone. I don't know. Well, and then obviously, we had your wedding to contend with our free time as well. So, So yeah, how's married life? Is it weird to suddenly have lots of free time not being consumed by planning?
It's no different.
Yeah.
No. It's this is the thing with life. I think most people will agree. It's a bit like water, where it takes it fills, or like a goldfish. That's the thing, isn't it? You have a pet goldfish and it grows to whatever size container you put it in.
Yeah.
So yeah, one thing goes away and then other things come along. So there's always something going on because that's just the way it is. So.
Well, that's fine. If things were fine before, then they're fine now. Okay, so enough of that chit chat. So what we're doing today, we're covering two films today in essence. So we're going to do the original 1954 Gojira, as it is in Japan, so Godzilla, and the 1956 recut version for Western markets, which is Godzilla King of the Monsters, which was cut and replete with additional footage for the West. So initially when we started this, we were going to go backwards through the eras, but change of plan, we bought that really tasty Criterion box set of the Showa era. So we've bumped it up the schedule just to get our money's worth out of that box set now.
Yeah.
So we're starting back at the beginning. Godzilla, 1954. So, I'm sure everyone is probably fully aware of everything we're about to say. There's going to be absolutely no hot takes in this whatsoever. But I'm going to give a rundown of the summary anyway, like I normally do. 1954, directed by Ishirō Honda. So we have 3 ships off the coast of Japan are destroyed mysteriously, one of which was a fishing boat from Odo Island. One of the island elder suspects that it's the ancient creature Godzilla. Reporters come to the island to investigate when Godzilla attacks, leaving some of the villagers for dead and their homes in a wreck. The government send in paleontologist Kyohei Yamane to investigate the island and finds a trilobite in a radioactive footprint left by Godzilla, and determines that Godzilla was a Jurassic creature awakened by hydrogen bomb testing. So the government don't want to release this information to the public yet, to everyone's dismay, and subsequently another 17 ships are lost at sea. The military are then dispatched to kill Godzilla, but Yamane thinks that Godzilla should be studied and not killed. So the military up the ante after they fail to kill him and create a huge electrified fence around the coast so that they can kill Godzilla when he comes ashore. But when he surfaces again, he starts melting all the pylons with his atomic breath and leaves the city in a burning wreck, resulting in hospitals being filled with survivors suffering radiation poisoning. So they need a new plan. Now, somewhere in this foray, we have Yamane's daughter, Emiko, who was once engaged to Yamane's colleague, a scientist called Serizawa, who she left to be with the salvage captain crew, Ogata. So he went out to the to inspect the wreckages, didn't he?
Salvage crew captain, you mean?
Yeah, the crew captain, yeah. Ogata.
He seems to have some sort of military connection.
Yeah.
He's a bit more of a man's man.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
I get the impression it's actually that the engagement with Serizawa is ongoing and it's an affair.
No, you're right. Yeah. So, not was once engaged, but it's still engaged too. So anyway, it turns out Serizawa is working on this secret project called the Oxygen Destroyer, which destroys all the surrounding oxygen in water and liquefies any mass therein. Emiko realizes that it could be the answer to stop Godzilla, so she and Ogata convince Serizawa to use it against Godzilla, albeit reluctantly, as he doesn't want his creation to fall into the wrong hands. So he prepares the weapon and destroys his research. He and Ogata head out to Tokyo Bay with the Navy and go down to the seabed to plant the Oxygen Destroyer, where Godzilla is resting. Ogata then returns to the surface, but Serizawa remains underwater so he can die along with his creation and ultimately kill Godzilla.
He takes all the knowledge of this deadly weapon with him, so people can't use it.
Exactly. So, I'm pretty sure the first time I ever watched it was that BFI release that I got you for Christmas about 15 years ago. Christmas
2007?
I think it was. And so was that the version you saw first, or did you see the US one first? I'm not sure, because I think you watched it before I ever did.
No, I hadn't ever seen it before I got that DVD.
Oh, right.
I just was always very Godzilla curious from obviously from our childhood being the 98 American movie. I'd always had this is the thing, is it'd never been that easy to get hold of Godzilla movies.
Especially in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, there was a few VHS releases, but certainly as a child, sourcing that kind of thing in a pre-internet age wasn't that easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the prevalence of DVD and the internet, we got to see a lot more Godzilla during those university years.
Yeah.
That was really my first exposure to actually seeing the films, despite having wanted to see them for a long time.
Right.
So I actually only saw the American version for this recording this week, because I felt like I had seen it before, but I think I've actually just seen other Americanized versions, because I think I might be off. I might not be correct in saying this, but in Escape, was it King Kong Escapes? I think has an American version.
Okay.
I don't think the 56 version of Godzilla is the only example of a Godzilla movie or a kaiju movie being reworked for an American audience with new scenes filmed. I think they've done it a few times.
They have, yeah.
So it's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, have I seen that? Have I not seen it? But no, watching this, the 56 version now, I was like, no, I've not seen this before.
Right. Okay.
I have seen since getting that DVD in 2008, I've watched Godzilla many times. I think it's probably the Godzilla movie I've seen the most. And this is kind of different territory for us on Monster Island Radio, because we're usually either talking about an action-heavy movie that we really like, or an action-heavy movie that we don't like because, we don't think it's that good. Yeah. Whereas this is, obviously it's a lot older. It's a pure monster movie with thriller and horror elements, and it's obviously got a stronger sort of revelry with the whole atomic allegory, which it's all about.
Yeah.
And normally when we come to Godzilla and with the age that we are, we're coming at it from a more pop culture perspective of just it's just this thing that just exists, and but when you try to put yourself in the mindset that this movie was made 9 short years after the atomic attacks, that a lot of the imagery, you have to kind of put the dated elements of the movie to one side and
absolutely.
Kind of view it as a quite dramatic film.
I think, when we first watched it together, I was struck at how moved I was by it, because we had just watched King Kong versus Godzilla. You had a box set that had a lot of the Kong movies.
Yes, I had those DVDs, yeah.
So we'd just watched that. So I was expecting something in the same vein. I was expecting it to be like a, schlocky B-movie type thing.
Yeah, more of a popcorn affair. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. But this, like, I just remember being kind of like taken aback after we watched it. So I mean, this was released in the boom of the radioactive monster movie era in the 50s. So with stuff like, The Blob, Tarantula, and stuff like that. And
the Beast and 20,000 Fathoms.
Yeah. I don't think it's fair to lump this film in with those. As much as I enjoy them, I love that kind of, I love that era. But this is so much more serious, like sincere in tone and premise. That I don't think it's fair to categorize it with those. So for some context, in case anyone doesn't know, but I'm sure most people listening probably do. One of the catalysts for making this movie was the Castle Bravo H-bomb incident at the Bikini Atoll, where a fishing boat called the Lucky Dragon No. 5, they got caught up in the blast radius of this H-bomb testing, and there's some direct parallels of that incident in the movie. At the beginning, you got people on the boat and there's that big flash.
They more or less recreate it
basically
as it would have been, isn't it? And
yeah. And they mentioned the atomic tuna and things like that. And
yeah. I was looking into the whole Lucky Dragon thing before recording, obviously, and it's interesting because the American army doing the tests did warn the Japanese public not to go out at sea, but they didn't tell them what they were doing. So although they were told to keep away, they didn't know that there was a threat to life.
Well, what I find interesting was that everyone stayed outside of the radius that they told them to, but they still got caught up in it.
Well, it's that they thought that, everybody else is staying away, so we'll have, it'll be open water, there'll be nobody fishing except us. So they went out there feeling like, what's the big deal? We've been told to stay out of the water, but we can just go do some sneaky fishing, and then
they still stayed outside of the area that they were told to stay outside of. So they were within their rights to be where they were.
Yeah.
So, but I see what you're saying, though. I mean, yeah, it's like.
No, I'm not saying there's any fault on their part, but it's this thing of if the Americans had said, "Don't come out to sea because you might get killed," they might not have gone out. So it's this thing of they were being savvy. This is a post-war economy they're in. Of course, they're going to try and make some money, but this atomic blast goes off, and they were exposed to radiation for something like 6 hours.
It's immense, isn't it?
And it's just
they were saying they were picking up ash and coral. And scooping it up into buckets and stuff. And they were literally handling this atomic waste, radioactive waste.
I saw a quote from a book that was written by one of the survivors that was written in the 90s when they did the memoir about their life. And
was this the he was the last survivor, I think, right?
Something like that, yeah. And I can't remember the exact quote, but he mentioned that they took some of the radioactive material that fell in the fallout back to scientists to show them, but they also tasted it and ate some. Yes,
that was the guy. Yeah, so I think he ended up living longest, remarkably.
That's wild, yeah. But this just shows how the lack of knowledge and the naivety that plays into it, and how they were the unwitting victims of this awful thing. But of course, then one of these fishermen actually died, and then less than a year later you get Godzilla the movie coming out that just kind of works as this sort of national kind of release, and almost a primal scream of what is all this that's going on with us, with the war and the atomic bombs that have gone off, and now this testing, and what is this national point of view from the populace of how the government is interacting with America now. And I think there's a lot in the movie which I understand a lot more now, being older and having seen more films and read more about it than when we first watched it back in the late noughties.
I think it's quite a bold move to make a reference to everything so soon. With Hiroshima and Nagasaki being as you said, less than a decade before then. And it's just, it was all still so fresh in everyone's mind. It's I don't know. I think it's quite a brave thing to do. Although I did read that I think at the time some people thought it was quite not manipulative. What's the word?
A bit tasteless or exploitative.
Yeah, a bit exploitative. Yeah, that's the word.
I imagine it would be viewed similarly to when, after 9/11 happened, Hollywood was quite quick to turn out a few movies. Like we've got this.
That's what I thought.
There's a Nicolas Cage one, isn't there? And then you've got United 93, which really deal with the raw kind of like recreation. Like this is exactly what happened, and we kind of don't know as a culture how to deal with it. And obviously that's an American tragedy that affects the whole world. So they've tried to work it into their art and their media. And I feel like in terms of post 9/11 content, it wasn't until about 10 years later that things started to come out which really were able to manage those emotions without doing a one-for-one recreation. And in Godzilla, obviously there is a one-for-one recreation with the fishing boat disaster, but also it is almost a decade on from the war, so it's kind of like this mess of emotion where it's like there's a lot to deal with. And it's almost like Godzilla as a monster movie has been made almost primarily out of a creative desire to emulate those other movies like Beast and the 20,000 and the King Kong stuff. All of that was very, very popular. But it
has a specific point behind it.
Exactly. It kind of becomes...
And that's what carries it.
It's a national kind of like, how do we process all this stuff that's going on in Japan at the moment? It does feel a little bit like, is this a bit sort of almost hackneyed, the way they're sort of doing a weird monster movie? But I don't think so,
I think if it had been a one-for-one kind of with replicating these events, it might have been, maybe not. It might not have been as strong, maybe. I think because it being a monster flick, you can have it's interesting that with film and, well, with any medium, really, with, books or theatre or whatever, you can have a parallel. You can tell a parable, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this does. It's quite weird that, as you say, it's kind of born of those, pulpy 50s monster films. So, like, in a way, this film carrying that message shouldn't have worked, but it did.
Well, I guess even like The Blob, which I've not actually seen the original Blob, but I know that it's about a kind of... a lot of those monster movies are about a sort of a communist
radioactive
fear, or like a Cold War sort of fear. So there's always, no matter how silly the movie may come across, usually in anything there is some deeper kind of motivation behind it. And I feel like Godzilla over time, and you can apply this to the first movie if you want, that it's a bit silly, it's miniatures, it's a guy in a costume, but the thing they're trying to portray to you is the destruction and the fear and the lack of control, and the way that the Japanese people feel about various things, whether it's atrocities committed against them or by their own country. So even though it's a monster movie, and it comes with all the trappings that you can attach to that and criticize that for, or it still has that content where it feels very sort of thoughtful, and exactly. Meaningful. So
there's on that Criterion box set, there's a special feature from this Japanese film critic Tadao Sato, and he was saying how much more sympathetic Godzilla was as the creature himself for a Japanese audience, because during the war Japan was a victim, but just as you said, it was also the monster itself that was defeated, so it added that extra layer of empathy, which I think again is why it works so well. I think a lot of the imagery in this is it's extremely heavy. Especially after that first atomic breath attack, you got the hospitals, these kind of makeshift hospitals are full, and you got people running Geiger counters over children and looking mournful because what their fate's going to be.
Exactly.
You got the dead mother laying on the floor, and that kid crying, and Emiko saying, don't worry, you'll see your mum soon, and all that kind of stuff. And there's this one particular shot which actually made me choke up each time I see it, is of this lady with her 3 kids cowering in this street corner as Godzilla's rampaging, blasting his atomic breath everywhere. And she's like, we're going to be with your father soon. And it's really upsetting. I think it's almost a bit too much, but I think it was necessary because, it showed the effect of Godzilla on that kind of human level, being this, at this mercy of this unstoppable thing. But, I say Godzilla, it's also about nuclear war,
Yeah.
It's literally showing that. And it's horrible to think that's what people were probably, that exact thing probably happened. It's a lot.
Yeah, I think it is heavy, and it's not. I think it's both that Godzilla represents an attack, like a nuclear attack, or just radiation as a presence in our world, but also a people who don't feel like they have agency over what's going on.
Yep.
Whether their country's being attacked because of a war or whatever else. So I think that is a very sort of like, it's evidence of a creative collective who've made the movie, the production team, who just feel it's needed, that we need to express this and show this and like kind of put a spotlight on that. And it's interesting because you mentioned that we're both watching this through the Criterion collection, and I was listening to the audio commentary of the Japanese original version, and both the Japanese and the American sort of re-edit have commentaries, and they mention on there that scene is in both movies, but in the American version they remove the audio, so that shot of the woman telling her kids that we're going to go see daddy, and they're basically going to die, and that fear is nullified to a point, and it's a point of contention, I think, is what's being explained on the commentary, that there's elements of censorship, and when you see the Japanese original of Godzilla, there's a lot in there that's like, this is a monster movie, but it means various things. It is primarily radiation, but it's so much more than that as well. And then when you watch the American one, and then you see this becomes Godzilla as a whole very quickly with the sequels, is that it just becomes purely a monster thing. It's just a story about a monster, and there is some of that allegory left over in the American 56 like redo.
There's a bit. It's
so blunted. It's so just like, it feels almost like an explainer than a movie in a way.
Yeah. I read an article on Collider about how, we'll get onto 56 a bit later, but basically saying that how it missed the point entirely by cutting so much stuff out.
And that's the thing I'm saying, really, is like some things are cut out because they don't understand it or they don't feel it's needed. Some things are cut out and you can presume it's been done because they don't actually want the American audience to see Japan's perspective on these things. Because
I think it's both those things. Yeah. I mean, there was one thing that the article mentioned, which I noticed as well, was like it was just like kind of almost a mundane thing about how it affected daily life. So they were saying like, the evacuation again. And they're like, evacuation again, like, I can't be asked with that. It's almost seems a bit silly to be like, of course you'd want to evacuate. If you want to live, you're going to have to evacuate. But that kind of so that scene was removed completely in the 56 version. I thought it was quite interesting because since COVID-19 has happened, like I wanted to. I remember saying a while back, I wanted to avoid talking about it on this show, just because it's been nice to look back at any episodes we record as archival. You could listen to them at any point in time.
We want to provide people like escapism as well.
Exactly. But sometimes it becomes relevant. So I think this is one instance where I thought it's quite interesting that when COVID-19 happened, so many people complaining about wanting to just go back to normal.
Mm-hmm. No matter what the consequences may be.
Basically, yeah, because you could stay safe inside your house, or you can go out and risk your life.
Yeah,
and I think both thought processes are completely natural, and it's really interesting to see that scene where it's like, I can't be bothered to evacuate again. I think I would have pre-COVID, I would have been like, what a silly thing to say. But, having heard other people say something similar during the pandemic, I'm like, okay, it just shows how evergreen this subject matter is, basically, to be honest. Yeah. And I wonder if the next Godzilla that Toho do is going to make a COVID parallel here.
Wouldn't be that surprising, would it really? And we've commented before that there kind of does need to be some sort of real world anchor point to give these things, a meaning. And I when I was watching these, the original, I reflected on 2014 a little bit about how there really isn't anything there.
No,
I feel like I reference it in terms of the monsterverse, but the Marvel movies that have come out recently are often criticised for being very shallow, and they are. There's not much allegorical material there. But even they do more than that 2014 Godzilla movie to say something about the world we're in.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, like, it's not very deep, but there's elements of, control versus fear, or, mass death, or imagery of cities being attacked, which I think does speak to a kind of post 9/11 point of view. Just, I feel like 2014, and we don't want to start talking about a completely different movie here, or go off on a tangent about Marvel, but it's just interesting that you need some sort of idea. And I feel like with the Fukushima thing and Shin Godzilla, you see that very strongly. And I feel like going back and watching, the 54 Godzilla, it's easy now to see like, yeah, Shin Godzilla is a much closer remake tonally and emotionally.
Oh, you just took away my conclusion.
Oh, sorry. But yeah, I mean, Marvel is not deep by any means, but I'm using it as a point to say, like, that 2014 movie, it's beautiful cinematically at times, but metaphorically, like, there is nothing there at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of just an indictment of that movie.
So I'm going to just carry on with the tangent a little bit because, I don't watch Marvel movies.
No.
I'm just curious, have they ever actually made a COVID reference?
Conspiracy theory time.
Uh-oh.
Is that
here we go.
It's believed.
Let me get my tea.
It's believed that a recent Marvel TV show, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, did have a virus plotline in it that had nothing to do with COVID, but that was then cut away because COVID happened during the production. They were like, well, we don't want to actually create a piece of entertainment that's like, it's a conspiracy theory,
right?
But no, Marvel's not commented on COVID at all. But I feel like MCU has become a bit dull, frankly, because they have tried and in some cases failed to modify their plans to adapt to the pandemic world, and they haven't done it that successfully.
Okay.
So no, I feel like they probably never will.
Yeah.
But this is the thing that I was saying earlier, and again, I don't want to harp on and on about Marvel, but they made a lot of 9/11 movies right after 9/11, and I feel that the public taste for it was not there globally. And although it may have facilitated some public grieving or some way of dealing with that imagery, it wasn't great content. And then in a movie like The Avengers, the 2012 one, which is quite shallow, as I said, like allegorically, seeing that imagery of New York specifically being attacked, but then saved by a bunch of cartoony heroes, actually is a kind of catharsis. And that's about 10 years on from 9/11. And then almost 20 years on, you've got Infinity War, where you have the snap and Thanos, it kills 50% of all life. That's really that really makes you feel like what the helplessness of that whole thing comes to bear in that movie. And although you could argue, is that movie that well made? Is the story that strong? But the effect of the characters being blipped away, where they turn to dust, and it looks just like, visually it's the same as when the towers came down.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying really, is that even in these movies, which are perceived to be very, throwaway and very superficial and purely, surface level stuff, they can surprise you sometimes with actually this visual is it brings you into a place mentally where you can sort of, when you and I and people we know are not touched firsthand by those atrocities. So I don't want to speak for anybody who's had those experiences, because I couldn't possibly know the depth of it. But it does sort of help you process that and feel like, okay, there's space in life, there's time has passed, and also I can approach this fictional version of these events to some degree and feel like I've got some kind of closure or way of processing it. And that's what Godzilla is,
Yeah,
so
I think a lot of it is time as well. So, after 9/11, the show Friends, that had a bit of a dip in ratings, but then after 9/11, it just spiked. So at that point, it was pure escapism.
And Spider-Man as well. I think you could apply some of that strong Spider-Man enthusiasm and popularity of those Raimi movies is probably part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it gets to, with time, having that imagery, after you've had a long time to process it, as you say, it can become cathartic. So yeah, I guess, now we're finished with our Marvel podcast just there. We'll go back to the Godzilla one. That's exactly what Godzilla does. And I suppose, it being nearly 10 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, maybe that was the right time,
you can sense that there is a national like need to, expunge or let out these feelings, and the lucky dragon number 5 thing just was the catalyst for like, we've got to talk about this, and it feels too close to that in some regards, as we've been talking about, but no, it's that time, as you say, which makes it like important.
Something you said earlier about the kind of preparedness of people to deal with nuclear fallout, I think was you could see that in this film as well. So like you were saying about people tasting the coral and ash and stuff. So something that really struck me was just seeing how underprepared everyone was to deal with it. So there's that scene when they're on Odo Island and they find the trilobite. There's no like proper hazmat suits or anything, and like he's digging through the dirt with his fingers. And I think maybe back then that might have looked a little bit silly on film. I don't know, but I mean, a lot of radioactive practices weren't ironed out until the 70s. So like there's still another 15 or so years after that, and it's just like I find that really, I find it really sad to see that that's what people were doing back then, and it's horrific.
There's a helplessness to it, isn't there?
Oh, like, man, yeah, completely.
It's like when you read about people who had like atomic like toothpaste and stuff, or like these products that existed in the early 1900s when like radiation was first discovered, and it's just like, It reminded me of this cleanser. It's Dorothy Gray's cold cream, I think it's called, or cold cleanser, something like that. I don't know if you've seen it. But there was this commercial for it. So it's just like sometime after World War II, Electric Boogaloo, there was this cream that's like so strong, it can remove radioactive dirt from your face. And they have a model in the commercial. They put radioactive dirt on her face. They have the Geiger counter next to it to show how radioactive it is. And then they use the cleanser to take it off. Oh my God. So presumably she died after this?
No one knows what happened to her. So I've looked into it so much, and I can't find out. No one seems to know.
Well, maybe they staged it for the commercial filming. Maybe
there's that chance, but
it seems we could maybe hang on to that idea.
But this is the thing. This is why I find it interesting, because it's like back then people weren't aware of just how much it could affect you.
Oh yeah. They
weren't sure of the quantities, but
you see that in this movie, isn't it? When they're arguing in the governing, like, oh, should we keep this a secret or do we make it public? And in the movie, obviously, they're arguing like, do we keep Godzilla secret or can make Godzilla public? And that seems like
that's like, I think that's quite it's become a central theme around a lot of Japanese Godzilla films. Is that kind of that bureaucracy
sure
around revealing this stuff to the public. Like, what I find interesting is like especially in this film, I don't feel like either side is in the wrong.
Right.
So, like, I think there is ultimately they were in the wrong by keeping it secret, but I can see that, the idea of not wanting people to panic and trying to resolve a problem.
But then you could also look at the real world implications of times when, just as the Americans did themselves during this testing, like just keeping too much of it secret, and then the repercussions. So it's like, the movie is very good at playing both sides of the argument, I think, and it lets you make your own mind up about things. But
I think this one comes closest. That comes closest to having both sides being fairly represented, rather than, the ones that want to keep it secret are the bad guys. Yeah,
or Godzilla is purely good or purely bad. Sort of thing. Yeah, I think that scene is really about the real world. Like, do we keep certain things secret or what? And I on the commentary on the Criterion Blu-ray, they talk about this as well, saying basically that it can be allegorized that people who want to keep it secret want to keep on working with the American state and easing into this kind of like new government, and the occupation is good and blah blah. Whereas the people who want things public are basically saying like, they want to fight more for their own agency as a Japanese people. So there's something to be said for that. You can read into it so much more deeply if you look at kind of not just the direct impact of the radiation on on Japan, but like, or the atomic attacks on Japan, but also just the whole culture of it. Because during other sort of research I was doing before watching the movies, I found out that this whole, the modernization of Japan took place over like a 30-year period towards like the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, whereas like Japan opened up to the world and sort of caught up with where other countries were in terms of like infrastructure and technology.
Right.
And then you have sort of like this fascination with American culture that takes place in the 1920s, which then becomes sort of stifled and put on hold almost culturally by the Second World War. And then you sort of return to it after the Second World War, but it's recontextualized. It's sort of like letting in the world again and allowing America directly to influence Japan, not just as like a culture with like movies and music and clothes, but like literally how we're going to run and govern the country, and how some people felt this was a really good thing and some people felt like that it was a bad thing. And yeah, it's a very interesting idea of like how, in the modern day, Japan, I feel, is still very sort of like West facing and like how they want to be perceived, and there's all sort of talks about that in sort of how beauty is represented in Japanese culture these days. And it's a very interesting topic, so I think all of that is in Godzilla as well.
It's it's a meaty one, this one.
Yeah,
it really is. You know what, I watched just after I watched it again a few days ago, almost straight after I watched an Ed Wood film called Bride and the Beast. Oh my god, by comparison, holy shit, it was such a disrespectful waste of time. It was like half of the film was stock footage. I felt like I was watching it all night, and I'd nearly finished my bottle of wine, so maybe that made it drag a bit more, I don't know. But just by comparison, oh Jesus, it was
the filmmaking craft, you mean, basically?
Even the subject matter.
Right.
It was just night and day. It was just interesting to see, two films from that era back to back. And it just showed me just how meaty Godzilla actually was. It was unreal. Anyway, let's talk a bit about the characters. So, kind of weird that it's, lucky coincidence that they were all miraculously key players in stopping Godzilla, all the people involved. So you have Ogata, who is played by Akira Takarada, who actually, he died a few weeks ago.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's sad. That's, Then Emiko Yamane, played by Momoko Kōchi. And then Serizawa, played by Akihiko Hirata. And then you have the Professor Yamane, played by Takashi Shimura. And then in the 56 Godzilla, you got Steve Martin, who was played by Raymond Burr. So Ogata, he doesn't really do that much, in my opinion. He's not a bad character, but he's a bit redundant. And I feel like I was watching it again, I was like trying to figure out what it is he's there for. And it seems to me that he just served as a character to make Serizawa's arc a little bit more tragic. And I think he was the only one actually out of the whole gang who was kind of the representation for the anti-Godzilla camp.
Yes.
He was the one that was saying, well, it'd be nice to study him, but if we do that, more people could die, so we should probably be stopping him. And he was the only voice to kind of say that within our group.
Yeah, that's his only purpose, I feel like, and they don't really there's not much else to work with really in the character. Like, you have this like, we have this illicit relationship going on, but you never really see anything about it. It's just talked about. And we've talked about this in the past as well, about how is affection, romantic affection, portrayed on screen in Japanese movies. And in this case, they kind of don't.
Very conservative.
Yeah, there's no like kiss or like hugging or like, these guys are in love. And, Emiko and Serizawa's relationship is like, you only ever see them together twice, and it's both really in the context of what we're going to do about Godzilla. I know she goes there specifically to tell him I don't want to do this, I'm going to go with this other guy. But even then, you don't really see the way they behave, these two couples. Obviously, she's involved in both couples, but neither one behaves in a way where you could say, oh, these two are in love and these two are not. So it doesn't really come to the front. I mean, I think for a Japanese audience, this wouldn't come across as a failing, perhaps, because they would just be like, that's just the way it is. But when you're watching it, with all these years removed and from a Western point of view, it's like, he's there.
Agata
is there, as like a romantic element, basically. Wouldn't you rather be with him than this other like weird, sort of, war veteran who's got an injury and spent all his time in the basement murdering his pet fish? Like, wouldn't you rather? But it doesn't even feel like there's that much of a tug. You just told them, like, she doesn't want to be with him, she wants to be with this other guy, and it doesn't go any deeper than that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that character is, other than the scene where he argues with the older professor, like, we've got to kill this monster.
Yeah.
There's nothing really there for that character or that actor to do.
That's that's the only kind of standout moment, really. That and going down to put the oxygen destroyer down there.
Yeah.
That's it. He's fine. Emiko, she was kind of the glue holding everyone together, I think.
She's the most emotional part of the movie.
Well, it's kind of... I think I struggle to find fault with this film.
Right.
Because I think it's that good. But if I'm going to pick on something, her acting when she needed to be emotional looked like she was stifling laughter. So when that little girl was crying after her mum died, I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to burst out laughing. She's biting her lip trying not to laugh here. Did you not notice that?
I do. I agree to an extent that she sort of has like an unfortunate like expression where she looks almost like she looks uncomfortable more than distraught. But
yeah, I think someone just told her the funniest joke ever, and she's like really trying not to think about it, and it's making it worse.
If I'm not mistaken, and there's a little bit about this on the commentary, to be fair, on the Criterion, but I think this is her first movie.
Oh, really?
And I get the impression from what I've heard, and that she was very intimidated, specifically by the Agato guy, because he was a big star. He was becoming a big star and remained a big star for many decades after this in Japan. And I don't know if there was a bit of like I'm new, I don't know what I'm doing, and maybe being a young woman in this very sort of male orientated environment. I mean, the movie's very male orientated, and we can take it as a given. She's
basically the only female there.
Yeah, I don't know that there were many women working on this movie outside of her. So I don't know that it would have been that comfortable an experience, to be honest with you.
Fair enough. Yeah,
I don't know. I think you're right that her performance is a little bit sort of like, what's the emotion here? But also she's given a lot of weight to bear because she is the only one who's being told like, oh, you're the young girl. We've got to have you screaming. We've got to have you crying. We've got to have you showing, for the most part, the terror of what is going on. I mean,
you're 100% right, because I think all the men in this movie, anytime they need to look emotional about something, it's like, okay, look stoic.
They look shocked, like they've lost to words.
Yeah, and like that's the extent of their emotional range that they're expected to display. So you're totally right.
We have the younger guy, the younger boy who comes back to the Japanese mainland, does some. He obviously witnesses his older brother being killed. There's a shot of him looking like viscerally upset when he knows that his family's under attack from Godzilla. So it's not just her, and obviously we have the other scenes of other citizens, people being attacked and killed by Godzilla. So it's not just her at all, but in terms of like a main character, she's our conduit to kind of know like, well, where are we at emotionally with this? And I don't think she was the most experienced actress, and I don't know what level of direction she was really given. So I agree with you, like there are a couple of shots where she looks a bit sort of like, I don't know what you're kind of showing here. But also, like, it's an older movie. There's certain circumstances I'll give it a pass. For me, my criticism of the film, you said, you can't fault it much, and I do agree. But it's interesting that while this does have, by a long shot, one of the more interesting human interest stories, it's funny that like from the very beginning, like from the word go, we've got love stories, we've got family drama, and like that's really got nothing much to do with Godzilla, other than you could lay onto it like, well, what is the national sentiment of like within families? You might have people saying this is good and this is bad, in terms of like the allegory of Godzilla, and then what does that really mean deeper? You know, that's all there. But yeah, I mean, the blueprint for what we still suffer from today really is there in the very beginnings. And I'd also say that by the time Captain Cockblock and Professor Eyepatch go down to the bottom of the ocean to destroy Godzilla, a lot of the tension is kind of gone by that point to me, because I think this is to do with the movie being 60 years old. But when you know this is the end, the runtime, we're getting to the end of the movie, they're going down to kill Godzilla. This bomb has never been shown to have any flaws. It works perfectly. It always kills the fish.
Yeah.
They're going down to kill him, and they do, and it's kind of like a bit of a drawn-out scene, and there's not much tension to it. So I think, to me...
Oh, I disagree.
I feel like that is the biggest flaw, though, is that on a rewatch, and I've seen this movie a lot of times now, to be fair, but like by the time they make the choice of, is he going to use the oxygen destroyer, and they go and do it, like the last sort of 5-10 minutes of the movie is just sort of like, yeah, kill Godzilla and it's over.
I feel totally differently.
How do you feel about it?
So I felt it was emotional and tense.
Right.
Because you can kind of see where it was going with Serizawa. Specifically, because, he wanted to die with... Well, he didn't say he wanted to die with his creation, but you just knew it was coming.
Right.
And that coupled with the music, specifically that music there, when they're going under... It's like when you know something sad's about to happen in a movie. Yeah, you know it's coming. And for me, when something like that happens, I feel myself getting really emotional in the anticipation of the thing happening. So when he goes down there with him and you hear that music and then you see Godzilla dying, you see his skeleton, it's like, it felt like a lot of emotion kind of peaked at that point. It all kind of built up to that exact moment. So you're saying kind of, the weight of that moment's taken out by, there's no tension at that point, but just for me, it hit differently.
I see what you're saying. Like, I'm saying that it's too predictable to me to hold much weight like on rewatches, but I guess what you're saying is that because it's so foreboding what's going to happen.
Because I even found rewatching I felt more tense because I knew it was happening again.
Yeah, I'm definitely not one of these people who says like, oh, movies don't have value if you already know what's going to happen. Like, I like rewatching movies, and I don't mind movies with foregone conclusions, like true story movies or whatever prequels. But I just feel like, I don't know, it just doesn't do it for me in that element. I love a lot of parts of other parts of the movie, even though I've seen it many times. But to me, yeah, the ending, it just feels like I need an extra ingredient to feel like maybe it won't work, is what I would say. So I could have my suspension of disbelief that the bomb might not work would be a good little element that I would have added to this, just so that the ending had a bit more kind of sort of uncertainty. But I see what you're saying, that the certainty of like, what's going to happen is sort of is what's creating the emotion for you. And I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. It just it's what I find a flaw in it for myself.
Yeah, I guess it's just different strokes. Yeah. Interesting. So thinking about the human scenes, I suppose, which is something we criticize constantly in these films. So Ishirō Honda, he actually cut a lot of extra human scenes because he felt like it was slowing things down. So I mean, the love triangle was kind of pointless in a way, and just made for that kind of, in my opinion, heart-wrenching ending.
So maybe there was more.
Yeah, there was. So there was a scene where it had Serizawa and Emiko as teenagers.
Right.
They were like on the beach.
So you could see them in love before they were not in love. Sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh wait, was it them two, or was it her and Ogata? I can't remember, but there was other stuff. There were other scenes.
Okay.
He made the right choice by cutting the extra human fluff, basically cutting that down to a minimum. And I don't think that ethos carried on as strongly as it did after this point.
No, certainly not when you get to things like Final Wars and Tokyo SOS and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this was kind of the best example of the human element in a film, in a Godzilla film specifically.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's a blueprint for the things that we've sort of endured in the years since, but it's not a bad blueprint either. I think one of the strongest things of it, and again, I do find this a little bit wary on rewatches, but I like how Emiko goes to Serizawa and she witnesses the oxygen destroyer and she sees how it works, but you don't see it at first.
Yeah.
And he tells her to keep it a secret. And at first, you don't know what she's being asked to keep a secret. But you sort of care about this character. You want to do well by the characters, so you want them to be all right, whatever. So inherently, you might say, like, well, she's been told to keep a secret and she's promised to keep a secret, so she will. But as an audience member, you have an eagerness to find out what happened.
Yeah.
So by the time she tells Ogato what she's witnessed, you're having this weird push and pull between, as an audience member, you might not actually want her to betray her Serizawa's trust in her or all of that, but you're also very eager to find out what's going on. And this sort of narrative device of like, being on both sides of something, which of course the whole movie has a duality to it, as we discussed. You don't see complex. I mean, it's not even that complex, but you wouldn't see like narrative devices like that in certainly in the Millennium era, where it's very much just like an A to B story.
Yeah, you're
right. This idea of like, she's got a secret and we don't know what it is, but at some point we're going to find out, because it's a very Chekhov's gun kind of thing. Like, of course we're going to find out what's going on.
But how are we going to find out?
Exactly. So that sort of keeps you interested in the human narrative as well as the Godzilla stuff. Yeah,
you're right. And I think her acting there is particularly good when she's telling Ogata.
And you just don't get that. Like, if we reflect on Godzilla 2000, when you have this like love story ish between like the reporter and the Godzilla chasing guy, and he's got the young daughter, right? Yeah. And the young daughter doesn't like the lady. Never resolved. Nothing ever comes of it.
In my opinion, I don't think she didn't like her.
Right. But what I'm saying though is like, there's no.
I think I know what you're saying, but like,
nothing is set up and nothing is paid off. The human story is literally just there.
You're right, because I remember saying at the time I wanted them to be in another film because I wanted to see them carry on and see what else they had to offer, because I was like, it felt like the start of something good. Yeah, but obviously that's it. Credits roll, they're gone.
It speaks to a desperation for something to just happen.
Yeah.
Where you're even willing to spend more time with boring characters on the hope that something may actually happen to them. But yeah, just a lot of times in these modern Godzilla movies, and we say modern, they're like 20 years old now, but...
Well, relative term.
Things are set up, and then they just like don't pay off, or worse, they're not set up at all.
Yeah.
I know you get a lot of things like, oh, so-and-so died in a previous Godzilla attack, so therefore I have to avenge that person's death and that kind of thing. Like, they do that a lot, and rivalries play out. Like, oh,
was it Megaguirus did that?
Yeah, like, oh, you're more capable than me, are you? Well, I'm going to show that I'm the capable one. And they do stuff, but like, that's just what I'm saying. It's like it's not a terribly complicated or deep thing, but she's got a secret, and we're going to find out what the secret is, and it keeps you watching, and that's really all you need. I like that. That was one of the stronger parts of the movie, is that, and I think it's actually it has certainly dated in the years since, but it's very modern for its time to show like some scenes out of order here, and to tease you like, oh, what's going on, like, we'll come back to this. And I think I like it.
I totally agree. I felt like all the characters had, for the most part, except maybe Ogata, but everyone had pretty clear motives, in everything they were doing. All their scenes felt important. It felt like all the characters mattered. I think it's one of the absolute peak examples of a human story in a Godzilla film. It's kind of interesting that the humans, I don't think people had much choice in what to do with Godzilla. So going back a bit on, whether he should be killed or studied, for example. I don't feel like, as much as I agree with Yamane's ethics about, wanting to study him, it's like, I don't think anyone really had any choice but to end Godzilla.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Yamane's logic would have worked. If you just left him alone, maybe he would attack but then retreat, and then you wouldn't see him again. But Godzilla only ever seemed to respond to attack after a certain point. Like, he would leave, come back, stomp around maybe a little bit, but then after the attacks, he was getting more and more aggressive. So it's like, I wonder if they would have just left him alone. Maybe it would have been fine. Maybe Yamane was right. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time they do kill him with the oxygen destroyer, I mean, he's literally sleeping. I mean, he gets up because he notices someone's there.
Yeah.
But he's asleep. I don't know. I wonder whether that would have worked.
I don't think this is what the movie's saying explicitly, but you can look at Yumane's point of view as like, we need to keep on doing nuclear tests, and people who are saying don't do nuclear testing, that's bad. That you could put it in that.
Yeah,
you could frame it that way. I don't really think that's the point of the character at all. But
he was saying about how did people survive this? How did Godzilla survive this? We need to find out. How. Do you think that's a way of saying we should do more nuclear testing?
I don't think the movie is saying that, but you could piece it together if you wanted to. Because they're saying, we should need to study Godzilla and understand it. And it's just like, does that element of the movie then have any allegorical purpose?
This is what I find so interesting, because you have two sides in this film, but there's so much more nuance than that. Like, you don't have good versus bad. No. You've got weaknesses in both camps. And I find this with a lot of people will say this, coming back to comics here, but people compare Marvel and DC comics, specifically the comics. Like in Marvel, there's kind of a joke about how villains are always villains, heroes are always heroes.
Right.
But in DC, it's, a lot of the time you can have the good guys being the bad guys and the bad guys being the good guys. I mean, as an example, there's a character called Clayface. He's traditionally always been a villain, but there's been entire arcs where he's with the good guys. He's one of the good guys. And it's interesting that it's never that clear cut. It's never binary. And I think this film is actually a really good example of that.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. It doesn't boil down to a simplistic thing. And I do not think that there is any part of this movie which is arguing that nuclear testing is good, to be honest with you.
No.
But I also just feel like you can swing it that way, that every argument is there if you look for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the special effects. So, I mean, of this era, it's pretty common. Like, there's lots of compositing, miniatures, and
double exposures.
Yeah, bits of stop motion, and only small bits of stop motion, really.
It's mostly like puppetry almost, isn't it? Like, there's a bit where the tail is clearly stop motion, but then there's other times where you can kind of see like they're just whipping it around on a string, and then they've kind of overcranked it. There's a few shots actually where people are running away, and you can see like, they've either sped it up after the fact or they've overcranked it to make them look like they're running faster than they actually were.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite common for that era. But the compositing specifically, I thought was actually really robust. Now, I think part of it is because black and white lends itself to compositing. There's no need to colour balance a shot to make sure they match and things like that. As long as the lighting's similar, it's much easier to do. But that, I don't think that takes away from what they managed to achieve, because I think the cinematography as a whole is very strong. It has a kind of a horror film noir sort of feeling to it. But there are some shots where you can kind of see, that's composited. It kind of wiggles a little bit.
Yeah.
But I watched a special feature on that Criterion box set. We sound like we've been paid by Criterion to talk about this.
No, we've got some criticisms of it coming up. So
okay.
Yeah, we won't all be praised as this Showa era goes on.
Okay. So yeah, well, one of the special features was saying about the matte paintings and how they were composited into shots.
Right.
And there's a whole load in there I never would have known it was composited. Absolutely
thing,
incredible.
There's some like model planes and model cars flipping over where you can be like, that's just a toy flipping over, and you can clearly see it.
Yep.
But there are some effects shots which are actually so good that you don't even notice that it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when they're on Odo Island, they weren't on an island. So like, and they had they painted in the sea in the background,
Right,
even though it was
yeah.
just like trees and road. And I was fooled completely.
No, never would know.
Yeah, absolutely incredible.
Because it's this thing of like, if you're not paying attention to it, they can get away with quite a lot. And often when the effect is the main focal point of the shot, like it's a little plane firing a rocket, it's like, well, I'm here to look at it. But then, you know, when something's in the background like that, it's like, well, actually, it's so good that you don't even give them credit for it. So, yeah. And there's some other like double exposure compositing things where they put people in like running away from Godzilla, and the level of sort of planning that's gone into that stuff is quite extreme. So, it benefits them to be filming in either harsh direct sunlight or basically total darkness at night time. That definitely makes the merging of two different shots is a lot easier. When, like you say, with black and white, you can just like blend a line. It doesn't matter. But playing to your own strengths is nothing to apologize for either.
No.
So it really works very, very well. And for a movie of this age, like there's lots of movies that don't hold up anywhere near as well.
No, true. Bride and the Beast being one of them.
I think this is an example. Godzilla as a whole is an example of like, a lot of times I think a layperson might come to it and say like, oh, well, Godzilla is where the kaiju comes from. This invented the whole monster movie like genre, right? When actually no, and there are other examples of this in life, in media, where it's like something has existed. I mean, Super Mario is an example of this. I think people look at Super Mario Brothers, the original video game, and think that's where platformers come from in video games. When actually no, Godzilla is just an example of something is developing in the zeitgeist culturally, and then suddenly you have one comes out where it's like, this one is the one. This is the preeminent movie where all future ones are going to be based on this one now, because they've taken everything they've learned from previous films and they've done it just right. Because there are like
just
previous...
a pioneer that's refined it, basically.
Exactly, because like really, in some regards, and maybe earlier ones than this even, but like you could say like King Kong is like the original kaiju, or there are other movies that you know that stake more of a claim to that than Godzilla. But yeah, like I'm saying about Super Mario Brothers, where there's obviously platforming games that came before that. Street Fighter is a good example of this as well, where it gets a lot of credit for inventing things in video games, when actually Street Fighter comes from a long lineage of gradual evolutions, and it was just the one that took off. And Godzilla is that, really, where it's like we can praise it for how refined it is and how good it looks all this time later, but there's like a bit of a graveyard just before it of probably not quite as well made movies that are pioneering but not as well remembered.
So yeah, I think they said initially they wanted to do they wanted to make Godzilla like all of his scenes to be a stop motion thing, but apparently there weren't enough people in the country that were specialists that could do that. So I think they wanted to go for that kind of, was it Harryhausen
exactly
kind of thing, which as a kid watching like Sinbad, I always found big stop motion creatures really scary because of the way they moved. So that's probably what they were going for. But then, you know, they were like, well, we actually can't do that, so what are we going to do? We'll have, you know, a guy in a suit. Which, you know, I still like. I like that. So, you know, I think they did a good job there. It's quite they were saying that the first suit they made was like kind of rubbish. It was too hard to walk around in and all that kind of stuff. So they split it in two. So like a lot of the stomping shots is the lower half. It's just the feet, and then the upper half was for the bits where, you know, he pops his head over the island. It's like, surprise, it's me. And then he has some full shots of the new suit as well. So yeah, they basically really, for all the full shots, they only had the one suit, and they just had to keep patching it up each time, you know, after each day of shooting, because like they're saying that for some of the, you know, fire breath sort of shots, they had a propane pipe above the actor's head that would blast out fire, and it would melt the teeth of the suit, and they had to keep kind of, you know, redoing it again and stuff like that. It was so much work. Hearing how much stuff they had to do to make this was absolutely incredible.
It's work, but it's also like the danger that people would be put in to make movies back in the old days is just like... I think it almost feels like a bunch of friends being like, how are we going to do this? Like, are you all right with this, putting up this pipe here? And they'll be like, yeah, okay, do it. You know? Right, yeah.
So I really love that kind of, what's the word? That sort of
Well, guerrilla filmmaking.
Guerrilla filmmaking. That is exactly what I was looking for. Yeah. I really love that. And yeah. And one of the other things they're saying was like, shots of the sea and stuff like that. They had this big pool.
Yeah.
And they filled it with, it's called agar. It's like seaweed. So, but it's like agar's it's like a gelatinous form of it. So they had, I can't remember how many they said. It was like thousands and thousands of these gelatin sticks they had to boil down and then put in the pool. And it took like a week just to do that. And it's all this work that went into it. It's just, I can't imagine how intense that must have been. But yeah, great admiration for that kind of filmmaking. I really do. It's incredible. And something else you're saying about the speeding up shots and things like that. Mm-hmm. You'd notice those moments. But something I didn't realize was when they have Godzilla walking around, they were filming it on a high-speed camera and slowed it down.
Yeah.
I thought he was just walking slowly and just doing it really well. I mean, I'm sure he was, but the employing that technique was really creative, and I wouldn't have noticed. Yeah, it doesn't look like slow mo. It's just a really, they managed to emulate that sort of effect of a giant creature walking through a city. It's very innovative.
So if you ever see footage of kaiju stuff, costume based kaijus being done where they haven't slowed it down. It always looks dreadful, and I think that the best examples of how bad that can look are from the original Power Rangers, where they move, like they flail their arms around quite a lot, and they do a lot of like karate moves, and it doesn't have like a sense of scale to it. Yeah, I mean, filming in slow-mo, they say it makes small fire looks more like large fire when it's filmed slow, so I guess they're using that. And some of the water gives away the scale. Like a lot of the time, Godzilla looks big in the movie, and it's pretty convincing, and the model work, destroying Tokyo is decent. It's only really when they get into the water and they're splashing around that like you can see like these waves are not like that big. And they've obviously found ways to improve that in the decades since, because I don't think that's true of all the movies.
Yeah, it's looks great. Love it. Okay, so the sound design and the music. So, I mean, does it need to be explained? I don't know, but my partner asked me, like, how did they make the Godzilla roar? So I think this is probably the best episode to talk about how they made it.
Go for it.
Yeah, so everyone who's listening already knows this, but I'll say it anyway. So they had a double bass, and they loosened one of the strings, and got a leather glove and put this kind of waxy resin on it, and slid the glove down the string to make that, that screonk sound. And just kind of, pitched it up and down and stuff like that to make this roar. Because I think they tried using animals, but it didn't sound right.
Not large enough sound.
Yeah.
The prolonged nature of this like bass scrape, I think, it makes it feel like it's coming from deep inside of an enormous creature and coming out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's its strength, really.
Yeah. Again, another very creative, innovative technique. I find this stuff absolutely fascinating. I really do, especially sound. And like his stomping. Apparently, Ifukube, the composer, he like tripped over a amplifier box in one of the studios. I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. Can I use your amplifier and kick it? And the guy whose amplifier it was, he was like, okay, if you need to. And they used that to make the stomping sounds. It's just great stuff. Happy accident though. But yeah, Ifukube, so he did all the music for this. And there are 4 tunes that stood out to me. So there's I suppose it's, as we've discussed on the very first episode we recorded, there's the Godzilla theme, which was actually really more for the military. Yeah. So the Godzilla theme everyone knows. There's that one. There's the Naval March, which is kind of this bit more kind of, do you know the one I'm talking about? It's a bit more peppy. It's when they set sail.
Right.
And as they're launching the depth charges, when they first try and take out Godzilla.
I couldn't bring it to mind, but presumably know what you mean.
Okay. Yeah, so there's that one. There's the one where he comes ashore at that power plant and starts, when he starts, with the atomic breath is probably my favorite. because you can't really hear it as much in the movie itself, but when you listen to it in isolation, you can hear they've recorded this piano, and they're just like hitting the lowest notes of the piano, and it sounds like stomping. And that combined with this kind of the string arrangement, it's so menacing.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's a musical iteration of Godzilla himself, and I guess that's why it was the Godzilla tune. Really, that's his theme. I think most of the tunes are like they're unmistakably different, and they're all recognizable and set a mood.
I think this is a sign of the times as well, but the music of the movie is so enduring that it lives on now, and they keep on using it now. But it would have had to have been memorable and strong, because people would have gone to see this movie in the cinema and maybe either not seen it again for many years, or potentially never seen it ever again.
Yeah.
So the fact that this music, through the life of the series, reusing it, of course, has maintained a pop culture presence, but people remember it because it is just really good stuff. So.
Yeah. Right. Let's talk a bit about the 1956 King of the Monsters. So, as I mentioned before, it's the same film, but recut, and includes newly filmed scenes with new cast, the main one being Raymond Burr, who plays reporter Steve Martin as he investigates the events that unfold throughout the film.
Shout out to our colleague Steve Martin. And all the other Steve Martins of the world.
Yeah.
It's this surprisingly common name. I think it's one of the things the American version is famous for. That it has Steve Martin in it.
So it's not that uncommon to have a recut movie for a Western audience. So one that pops into my mind is, I've not seen it, but Red Cliff, this Chinese film. I mean, in China and probably other places in Asia, it was two films, 2 parts, totaling 5 hours, and they cut it down into 1 2.5 hour part for the West, which obviously they cut out a lot of stuff, but it's formatted in such a way it makes sense and is more appealing to a Western audience.
Marketable, basically.
Yeah. So what's unusual about this film, King of the Monsters, is the adding of additional scenes. So maybe there are other examples prior to this where they've done that. I actually probably should have looked into it, I don't know, but to my knowledge, this is the first example of it being done, which is strange. But I mean, let's be real here. I mean, they wanted a white face for a Western market.
I think that's the thing, isn't it?
One of the producers said that the US wouldn't go for an all Japanese cast, and I suppose it just being after the war, that might have had something to do with it. I mean, by today's standards, it's pretty disgraceful. But it's not fair, I don't think, to put this film through a modern lens and pick it apart like that. At the time, it probably made more sense, and I think it did work. It worked out.
Yeah,
but
I think
it's a bit, leaves me feeling icky.
I think it's got pros and cons. One of the benefits of this is that at some point they decided that they do want to share Godzilla with the West, and they want to do it in a way where it will be successful. So they do what they can. They add some scenes, and it's basically like, it's a white American guy goes to Japan and basically talks you through the movie. I mean, for anybody who hasn't seen it, this movie is not dubbed in any extensive way. They basically just literally have the same scenes from the Japanese original in Japanese, and then it will usually cut back to Steve Martin asking somebody what's going on, and then an English-speaking Japanese guy will explain it, or in monologue over the movie, Steve Martin explains what's going on.
Yeah, so because we have, that's it.
It's good that they've wanted to bring Godzilla, to the West. That's good. But in doing so, and at the time, as you say, this would not necessarily have been seen as a bad thing, although it very much is. They've basically trivialized and caricatured and dehumanized a little bit the Japanese element of it by just saying like, oh, it's just this weird place where like there's a monster basically, and there's nothing mean-spirited about this version intentionally. I think the American version is very much like, let's introduce you to Godzilla, but it does sort of, like I say, it nullifies the Japanese element in that regard, and also the restructuring of it. And tell me what you think about this, but it completely kind of like dulls the story. Like, it's just not. It's the same story, but not interesting.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I suppose the narrative it's a little bit different. For the most part, it's just retroactively adding Steve into scenes where he's just stood off to one side smoking.
You could imagine that he was there, in the Japanese original, if you want, like, just not on camera.
This is how I enjoyed it most, was thinking of it as like a midquel, interquel kind of thing.
Right.
Where it's like, oh yeah, here's the other angle of the shot you didn't see. Here's the other side of it. So yeah, I do kind of put him there when I watch the Japanese one as well, just because it's more entertaining to think of it that way, really. So I mean, for anyone who's not totally aware of it, but basically Steve Martin he's basically buddies with everyone from 54. So he's friends with Emiko, Serizawa, and whoever, and so he's there on his layover from Tokyo, right? He's going to Cairo. Oh, I don't know, something. He's in Tokyo. So, and then he ends up staying there to investigate the Godzilla attack. I mean, the rest of the plot's mostly the same, but it does take out some points where Emiko's like, she's like, I know what can stop Godzilla. It'll be the oxygen destroyer. Right. And they've changed that to be like, they make Raymond Burr be like, I know what to do. You tell them to do this, It's a bit kind of, okay, we've made him the hero. And it makes Agata even more redundant in this film, I think. Yeah,
and the way, like, Steve Martin basically commentates the entire movie, and he's like talking about this love triangle. It's just like, if in reality
they pushed on that a bit too hard.
Well, it's just trying to sell the movie, isn't it?
Yeah.
As of all these things, but it's like, if he was there in reality and there was a big giant monster like killing people, and he was like, oh, I've got to report on this and write a little, sort of first-hand account, he wouldn't be talking about their love triangle at all. He would not be interested in the slightest. So yeah, the fact that it gets mentioned, like, it's this perverse thing where, like, we're putting the movie through a new perspective. It's like, well, that perspective would naturally eliminate some elements of the earlier version. And it's like, we had to keep all of that. It's like, they probably would have been better off just remaking it, which is evidenced by that's what they do now. In 98 and 2014, they just make their own version, which is kind of what they need to do. And even those, I mean, we probably could be considered by some to be very soft on the monsterverse for how it sort of, as you've commented on a couple of occasions, it does sort of excuse atrocities effectively.
Yeah.
But the fictional version of Godzilla that we have from Monsterverse does not really have anything to say about Bikini Atoll or the bad things that happen there, which we've only scratched the surface of in this podcast.
Yeah, but, I mean, well, there was, I think it was at Godzilla 2014, there was one mention of it right at the start. You see the Castle Bravo incident, and that's in the opening credits for 30 seconds.
It's just an origin story. It's just, oh, well, that's how you get a big lizard. And that's basically where it stops.
If you want one, this is how you do it.
Yeah, so this 56 version, it's not, it's just mundane. That's what it is. It's so middle of the road. It causes offence to us as modern audiences. It definitely caused the same offence back,
I think
in its era, just less so to a Western audience, more so to a Japanese audience.
I imagine most people, most Western audiences, this was probably their first exposure.
Yeah.
If it wasn't 98, it would have been this. And, I've read online that a lot of people have a soft spot for it because, it was the introduction of Godzilla for them, which is I totally get. And so they still really enjoy it. And I think for us, maybe we're in a somewhat unique position where the first one we saw was the Japanese one. So seeing it this way around was really, really jarring.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is yes, it's not great. You can criticize it. I don't really feel like it should be promoted as a main version of the movie at this point in history. But if it's done a job of popularizing Godzilla and meaning that people will enjoy this and, as a result, gain a greater understanding of Godzilla and of Japan, and understand why actually this version is not a good thing, it's not bad to have it. It's served a positive purpose.
Yeah. The scenes with Raymond Burr are so strange.
I love any time where he sees Godzilla and he doesn't react at all.
Yeah, so all his films, they look like they roped him in while he was filming another movie. Yeah. While he was on his cigarette break, just shoot these scenes. It's like, okay, fine, I've got 5 minutes. you know. And there's one scene where there's that monsoon on Odo Island, and he's still holding his cigarette while the monsoon is blasting. It's, oh my god! This whole film is just him smoking while someone explains to him what's going on.
He just looks so unbothered by...
God, completely.
Like, he may as well be choosing what he wants off the lunch menu as much as he's looking at Godzilla murdering people.
Maybe that's what was happening. He was in the canteen, someone was shooting him, he was looking at the menu, they're like, we'll use that. Great shot.
Do you know what I think, though? It's like, and I'm sure this is probably... There's a record of this somewhere, but I wouldn't be surprised if Raymond Burr had not seen Godzilla.
Had no idea what it was. I thought the same thing. I loved the idea that he was like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm just going to phone it in.
It's either the direction of him as an actor or his skill as an actor. So they're saying to him, like, well, there's a big lizard destroying Tokyo. And he's like, mate, I don't know what Godzilla looks like. I've never been to Tokyo.
Let's do it.
This is just a paycheck for me. And he's like, oh, it's literally like, there is no expression. There is nothing at all on his face. Like, zero. He may as well be asleep. It's just like, yeah, so, no.
So, you may or may not know, I don't know. I don't know if you've seen this film, but The Return of Godzilla?
This is the next one, right?
No.
No?
So this was in 1984.
Okay.
So, basically, we had the same thing happening again. So we had 1984, we had Return of Godzilla, which I've not seen.
No. I don't believe I've seen it.
I've seen the 1985 US version.
With Raymond Burr in it.
With Raymond Burr in, again.
I feel like I've got like a... Yeah, you're picking at a very, very faint like memory in my brain where I think I've heard this before.
Okay.
But no, I've never seen the movie. But yeah, this idea like, oh, Steve Martin's a beloved character by American Godzilla fans, so we have to bring him back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what they do, right? Something like that.
So it'll be interesting when we eventually get to that film.
It's 2020.
Whatever year it will be.
Or whatever,
yeah. I loved that. I loved that film, and at the time, I didn't realize that there was a Japanese version, the original 84. Right. So to me,
eager to revisit now.
Oh, absolutely! It should be an interesting watch. But I was like, oh, it's the guy from 56. He's back. And to my knowledge, I was like, oh yeah, the Japanese audience must have loved his scenes, and that's why they included him. I didn't realize it was a recut version again. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. I'm glad that they refrained from, they could have made it quite campy, I think. They could have added in lots of shots of people screaming and...
What, this 56 version?
The 56 version, sorry, yeah. I think they did what they set out to do without ruining it.
Yeah, I think it has good intentions entirely. Is that they wanted to just deliver Godzilla to America, make a ton of money off it, hopefully. And there you go. And they didn't deliberately butcher the film by any means, but it is a 1950s version of what America thinks a Japanese movie should be like, with all of the implied racism and sexism that you would assume is there. So, yeah, I think it is an overall net gain for Godzilla that this happened. But is it enjoyable? Like, I would not really recommend anybody watch it unless they were obsessive about these movies.
If you're short on time, I think the pacing's a little bit better.
I don't agree with that myself, but...
Well, it's 10 minutes shorter.
It doesn't feel it.
I suppose you're right.
But hey, whatever. I had to go back and actually rewatch a part of it, because when I watched the American one before watching the Japanese one for this viewing, and I was sure that at the end, he says to her, Agato says to her, "We can't be happy together." And I was like, what? He's going to dump her? Like, after what just happened? Like, but there are many changes. And like we said earlier, like there's audio that's left out, and there's the political scenes are cut out. Like the whole, like, should we make this public or not? That's gone.
Yeah, they include the bit where where everyone was getting pretty raucous.
Right.
But you couldn't hear anything anyone was saying.
But there you go, yeah.
That was it, yeah.
Because they're happy to have Godzilla, but they don't want you to be really thinking about it in any other way other than it's a big monster.
They're trying to make it a 50s monster movie.
Which it is, anyway. So, yeah, I mean, this is all like, it's definitely a sin to do such a thing. But yeah, I think that's the thing with this movie, is it serves a purpose for Godzilla along the way. It's a stepping stone to better things.
Yeah. I mean, that's the extent of my thoughts on 56, frankly. It's, yeah.
When I first put it on...
I don't want to sound too much of a downer on it. I think it's just because of the way we've come at it is a bit different to everyone else, because I know a lot of people, they love this film. And they're right to feel that way.
Well, I could see if you watched it when you were younger with no awareness of what else was available, you'd find it more enjoyable. That's absolutely fine. Nostalgia is what it is. That's okay. When I first put it on, I was kind of amused by it, like the novelty of like, oh, it's like a different version of the same thing.
Yeah.
The first like 20 minutes or so is quite enjoyable for that reason, but it does drag on, and having things just explained to you. And I would liken it to when they added narration to Blade Runner, which is like a famous studio re-edit where, we've got to have Harrison Ford telling the audience what's going on because it's really incomprehensible. And it's just like, actually, no, it's not. And obviously, like in 56, you could appreciate why a studio would want to do that. Less so in 1982 with Blade Runner. So, yeah, it's that kind of thing where it's like, this is a curiosity at this point. I would recommend it to the hardcore, exhaustive fans, but nobody else. No.
So, do you have a favourite moment from either film?
I really like the part where there's a bunch of reporters on the radio tower in Tokyo and Godzilla is attacking it and destroys it, because I think it does a great thing of characterising these people very simplistically, obviously, but they have a level of
duty.
They're dedicated to their role, which I think is something that I really admire real life reporters for as well. So seeing it portrayed this way, like they record the events of Godzilla's attack right to the very last moment of their own lives. It's a great scene for the special effects. Godzilla looks great, and it really serves the movie. And it holds up as, I think, one of the more, impactful and modern scenes. Yeah,
absolutely. Actually, that I think is it. The lead up to that shot, there's a particular shot of Godzilla where it's the way it's filmed. It's almost like flickering. And the lighting there on Godzilla, it's like a true kind of horror cinematography, and it's probably my favourite shot in the whole film is just before that moment. Really, I totally agree. My personal favourite was there's a specific shot where he's you can see Godzilla's silhouette against the city on fire. Yeah,
so one of the only really, really wide shots, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, and I felt like that encapsulated everything that the film was going for in that exact moment. So I mean both these scenes were around the same time, so it's that specific portion of the film I think is its strongest moment. So I have a pop quiz for you. Oh yes, are you ready?
I guess so.
You don't have much choice, it's just going to happen either way. So I came up with, we've got five questions.
Okay.
Question number 1. So this is about 1956 actually. So how many scenes do we see Steve Martin smoking? Is it 9, 10, or 11?
It's a good tongue twister there.
Yeah.
I would have thought it was more like 15 or 20 to be honest with you, but
I thought so too, but it was actually less than that.
9, 10, or 11.
Yeah.
I'll go with 10.
11.
I see. It was clearly going to be 11, but
it was obviously. And what's more surprising is that Burr filmed all his scenes in one day.
Oh, is that surprising?
No. The fact he sparked up 11 times.
Oh, well,
in one day to shoot them. That's what made me think it was on his cigarette breaks from another film.
I used to have grandparents who'd smoke like 45 cigarettes a day.
Yeah, but he's probably doing that off his other scenes as well. It's just like he couldn't stop.
He's having 10 cigarettes on camera. He's probably had about 30 more off
exactly
camera.
He's like he literally couldn't stop himself. He's like, sorry, I've got to have another. I can't go 5 minutes without one.
The stress of Godzilla's attack is putting a lot of strain on.
Really got to him. I mean, that monsoon, I can see why he's holding onto his cigarette.
Take a second.
Okay, so question 2. How many days did it take to shoot Godzilla 1954? There's no multiple choice here. Have a guess.
It's in the region of 70 days.
Yeah, you're not far off.
Because they say it on the commentary track.
Apparently, it took 51 days.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I thought it was more than that.
It might be more with other things as well. maybe editing.
I might just be misremembering, but I remember them saying on the Criterion commentary track that it took longer than most movies, which you would assume it would.
Maybe with editing as well. Maybe that.
Maybe it was like total time spent making it.
Yeah, but the actual shoot apparently. That's
what
I heard was 51.
Sound. Yeah, that's probably what.
Which I think also incredible, just considering it took a week to boil down all those gelatin sticks to make the sea and stuff like that. It's just really intense. Yeah. So okay, question 3. What was the original pitch title of the film? So this is multiple choice.
Okay.
Was it The Giant Monster from 20,000 Miles Beneath the Sea? Was it The Terrifying Beast from 200 million years ago? Or Furious Dinosaur Tokyo Rampage?
I think it's the last one.
No, wrong. That was my very funny title. It was the first one, Giant Monster from 20,000 Miles Beneath the Sea.
That's a complete rip-off of the Beast from and 20,000 Fathoms, isn't it?
They acknowledged that. They said that it was inspired by that film.
Legally speaking, though, you can't just go around acknowledging things.
I acknowledge that I'm ripping you off. Yeah. So that was the idea. That was the title that Tomoyuki pitched initially.
They ended with a better title, didn't they? Really?
Yeah, definitely. So, question 4: what was the estimated percentage of Japan, of the population, that went to see Godzilla on its release? No multiple choice here.
I'm going to say it was probably over 80.
Oh well, this is not going to sound very. No, it was way less than that.
Okay.
It was 11%.
All right,
but
I'd probably be more than that.
That's still a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
That's
I've grossly overestimated.
Yeah. That's kind of taking the wind out of the sails on that one. I
was just thinking less. There's probably less to do than 54. Probably played for like a year or more.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not mistaken, didn't they make the sequel to this pretty fast?
Yeah, the next year.
It's less than a year, I think. Even it comes out.
It would have, because it came out November the 3rd in 54, and then the next one I don't know when it came out. We'll have a look. I suppose we'll cover that one next.
Yeah. I was thinking it's massive. But no, I guess not.
Never mind. Okay, so question 5, last question. Godzilla was initially going to be A, a giant whale,
right.
B, a giant octopus, or C, a giant crab.
A giant octopus.
You're right.
Yeah.
Good job. Okay, so you got one.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was the initial design concept by the special effects artist Eiji Tsuburaya,
which wouldn't have worked.
No,
in any anybody's imagination.
No. So I've also got a bit of trivia that I couldn't form into a question, but I wanted to include it anyway. So there was an attempt at the first American-made studio Godzilla in 1983 with King of the Monsters 3D.
Oh yes.
By director and producer Steve Miner.
Steve Martin.
Not Steve Martin. He went to Toho with the idea and managed to gain the license, but it ended up reverting back to them after he couldn't get funding in time. So, the synopsis is online. You can look at it on Wikipedia. But the gist is a nuke hits Earth after this satellite is struck by a meteor, and then Godzilla's awoken. And there's a baby Godzilla in there and a character called Dana Martin, based off of Steve Martin.
Steve Martin's daughter or something.
I don't think it actually was, which is weird. It should have been, but...
who knows what would have transpired.
Well, yeah, and there was an island called Oto Island rather than Odo Island, which is just off of Hawaii. And it's such an obvious attempt to have a jolly to Hawaii, do some on-location shoots there. Yeah. Part of me would have been curious to see it because Steve Miner was the director for Friday the 13th Part 3, which was also in 3D. And that's one of my favourite films.
Oh, okay.
I love that film. But I'm glad it didn't happen because the guy attached to write it doesn't like Godzilla films. And he's never seen one the whole way through. So, yeah,
probably
no thanks.
Wouldn't have done a very good job then.
It would have been awful. So, yeah, glad it didn't happen.
Though, to be fair, not liking Godzilla movies might give you some scope to, improve upon the flaws of what he may be justifiably criticising as a film writer, because many of them are not very good. So
potentially, but then you could completely miss the point. One of the things we loved about GVK was like, it was clearly fans of the franchise. So it was like, yeah. So anyway, bonus point for sitting there listening to me sandwiching some trivia.
2 points.
2 points. There you go.
For some reason, I thought I was doing better, but obviously not. Just true for so many things in life.
So overall, I mean, it's pretty clear. I was going to say like what are our overall impressions here, but I mean, it's pretty clear that I love this film. You love this film as well. I feel like it gets pretty much everything right. And as you mentioned earlier, I wanted to include this in my overall opinion, but I mean, you already said it. Like seeing this again has made me notice how similar Shin Godzilla, the 20. Sure, yeah. I can't remember what year it was now. 2016, yeah. How similar that was to 54. You know how similar they are to one another. Yeah. And Shin Godzilla felt, absolutely, true in tone to what they wanted to do and adopted, this parable for a modern time. With the Fukushima disaster. And I think it'd be quite good to watch that again after having watched 54, because it does feel like Shin is essentially a modern remake of 54.
That's exactly what a remake of this movie should be. Using giving it some modern context, but keeping that kind of singular monster. What does it mean? Sort of question, and amping up the whole political element of it. The whole bureaucracy behind the problem. I think, which is they have more freedom to talk about those kind of problems today than they did back in 54, and that's what makes Shin such a good movie.
Yeah.
I would say, to be honest, love is a bit strong for me actually on Godzilla 54.
Okay.
I do really appreciate it, and I really have a lot of respect for it, and I feel like at this point in my life, having seen many other Godzilla movies and having watched this one many times, I really understand the depth of it a lot more now than when I first got interested in Godzilla back, in our uni days. But I would not put this on, for a jolly. I tend to watch it when it's to compare it directly to something else Godzilla related. The time I watched it before this would have been before we recorded our first episode to do King of the Monsters for the Monsterverse.
2019.
Just to compare it like tonally. And I've shown my wife the movie before we went to see 2014. That day we watched this movie in the morning, and we went to see Godzilla 2014 in the afternoon for a direct comparison. So I do really like it, and I've watched it many times, but yeah, I don't enjoy it in the same way I enjoy some of the other Godzilla movies. And I think I would say that I'd probably sooner watch King Kong, the 33 movie, if I was looking for entertainment. I think that movie is a bit, it's lighter. I think that's the thing. This movie is a lot of fun in a lot of ways, but it still has stuff like you got to think about some pretty serious stuff, and I think that weighs on our minds, as people who appreciate the movie to the fullest extent.
That's fair. I mean, I think the heaviness about it is what I appreciated most about it, which was what cemented it in my mind as being, in my opinion, a masterpiece.
Exactly.
I think it's. I think it can't be overstated how well developed it was, and what a strong foundation it was for the rest of the entries into the franchise. I mean, even down to the things like, when he's charging up his atomic breath, for example, his dorsal plates light up. Yeah. I would think that as being like a modern thing. They're like, oh, how do we make this look cooler? This is something that was like everything you see in subsequent Godzilla movies, you see in this film done pretty much perfectly.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying. Do you want to sit there and feel miserable? It's like, well, not all the time.
So. It's the same way I would put Godzilla vs. Kong on over Shin Godzilla, because it's just an easier watch. But I do love movies like this where there's a serious element to it. It's like one of my favourite movies is Apocalypse Now. I really love it. But it's not an easy watch, so I don't watch it very often,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, we both really like it. And if you want to cover the question of would we recommend this to first-time viewers?
I think it's not a, could someone watch it, it'd be a should. Really, I think it's essential viewing.
I agree that if you're getting into Godzilla, like put this high on your list. I think it does depend on your audience. If somebody's saying, "Oh, I want to watch a Godzilla movie," you should put this on first, perhaps, but it depends on why they're interested in it. I would say that this is a good one to pair with another one, either a modern movie or one that's a lot more jovial, just so you get the full kind of scope of what Godzilla is.
I suppose, when people think about Godzilla now, I suppose a lot of people would be like, oh, it's more action oriented. It's a big monster. I want to have some fun.
Yeah, so it depends on the maturity of who you're watching with. In some ways, I definitely think I
wouldn't even say maturity. Maybe you're just not into that kind of thing, or you are.
Well, in terms of like an age, like a child, or or just the mood you're in. Do you want to sit and have a thought provoking movie viewing experience? But there's also a guy in a costume. Like, how are you going to come to it? But yeah, I think it's easy to recommend to first time viewers if you want to learn what Godzilla is. Like, why wouldn't you start here, basically?
And would you recommend 54 or 56?
Well, like I said earlier, I wouldn't recommend anybody watch 56 unless they had an insatiable curiosity for Godzilla or movie history as a whole.
Or you just love Raymond Burr.
Yeah. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
It's got some moments where you're just like, oh yeah, this is interesting, but it is film study. I think Criterion made the right call putting it in the special features.
I wish it was more clear that that's where the film was hidden on the disc in the special features.
That's part of the set's failing, I think, is that it doesn't really direct you that well to where things are.
So listen up, Criterion.
We'll no doubt talk about it more, I think. We've had a lot to chew on with this movie, but as other movies pop up, we'll probably reflect on its contents a bit more.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've got a new section for the podcast, which we'll refer to as Kaiju Corner, and probably will from here on out, as it's now been put out there. So yeah.
What's the purpose of Kaiju Corner?
So this is where we talk about, miscellaneous kaiju or Godzilla-related things that we, see out and about that are separate from the films, because there's other stuff out there.
What's the footprint that Godzilla's left on culture, you might say?
Oh, very good. Yes.
Maybe like Kaiju Footprint or Kaiju Corner. I don't know. The name's just up in the air.
I like Kaiju Corner personally because it's got the Kaiju Corner. But if people listening, let us know what you think. Come up with suggestions. But so there are things separate from the films that we'd like to mention or talk about. But because these are primarily film-focused episodes, we can't really find a way to bring them up a lot of the time. So we dedicate a little section if there's something we want to talk about. So for me, recently, I told you about it the other day, Graham.
A preview?
A little preview. So a friend of mine told me about this event here in London with Yokocho Ramen. It was a Godzilla crossover. So I didn't think I'd get to go because I was only told about it a few days ago. And
right.
I didn't think I'd get time off work, but I managed to sneak out early and go on like a bit of a date night with my partner.
Lovely.
So it's, it's at the Heddon Street branch, which is just off of Regent Street, if you know where that is. So they had, a Godzilla themed menu, and they kind of decorated the restaurant with the vintage posters and Godzilla cutouts, and the staff were wearing Godzilla sweaters, and they had merch and stuff like that. So it was looking forward to it.
Was the food like Godzilla themed?
Yeah, so it was a themed set menu.
Right.
So for your main, your ramen, you could have Gojira volcano ramen, which had some meat in it. I'm not sure which meat it was. I can't remember. Could have been chicken.
A meat.
A meat. That's what my partner had, and
it's usually pork, isn't it? Like in ramen.
Oh, it was pork.
There we
yes,
go. You
she
got
said
the
that.
meat expert here.
Yeah. So my partner loves pork, so yeah, she liked that aspect of it. And I had because I'm vegetarian, I had the other one, which is the Kaiju volcano ramen, and it was hella spicy.
Right.
You would have loved it.
I probably would have gone for the veggie if I was there. I've started to eat veggie stuff more frequently out and about. Like if I go for a katsu curry, I tend to go for the veggie option now, less so than the chicken, because I love my meat. But it's just better for the environment, if we could just cut down meat consumption.
Yeah.
So I probably would have shared in your spicy ramen bowl there.
There you go. So yeah, that was the main. Then you have a drink, 2 drinks to choose from. So there's Wake Me Up in Tokyo or the Sunrise Melon Soda. So the Wake Me Up in Tokyo was a whiskey-based cocktail, which was actually really, really tasty, really sweet.
Nice.
And the Sunrise Melon Soda was a non-alcoholic cocktail, basically. Tasted like those watermelon lollipops you used to get, when you're a kid. The watermelon flavoured pops.
I've had watermelon flavoured Jolly Ranchers, and they are
like that.
So I imagine, and I love a watermelon flavouring. You could just dispute how true to watermelon it is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was that sweet in a glass, basically. It was nice. And for dessert was King of the Monsters matcha cheesecake or the Mothra's favourite mochi ice cream. So we were really excited, and I couldn't wait to get there. And so we got there, and maybe I shouldn't harp on about it too much, but it was disappointing. It was a letdown. So, I mean, first thing, my drink came eventually, and it didn't include the Godzilla decal on it, which is what is the Wake Me Up in Tokyo one. So it's meant to look like Godzilla, against the skyline in this like kind of red dot, and it's supposed to be on top of the drink. But the drink came, and
you get to keep that, I assume.
You eat it.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it's like a sugary wafer type thing. So yeah, didn't come with that. Disappointing. Tried to order some other drinks. She never came back to see us. So we kind of had our ramen, and we were sat there for nearly 2 hours before we saw this woman again. And,
Jesus Christ.
And when she surfaced again, she was like, "Guys, you need to leave soon. Yeah, we're closing." We're like, "Wait, you didn't bring us our desserts."
Right.
She's like, "Oh, right." So she ran out, grabbed the desserts, and while we had a mouthful of food, she's like, "Oh, can you pay?" I was like, "Okay, fine." So paid really quickly. And I mean, the main reason, well, not the main reason, one of the reasons we wanted to go was to get ourselves some merch.
Yeah.
And to get you something.
Oh, thank you.
Because,
thought.
You
I can see where this is going, though.
You're in a different city.
Not going to get anything.
You're getting nothing, mate. Nothing. So we said, "Oh, I know, you're closing now, but, you forgot about us for 2 hours, but we still want to buy some stuff. Can we buy some stuff?" And she's like, "Nah, till's closed." I'm like, what?
This is my
hell?
That's such a pet peeve in life, is when you want to give somebody money and they won't let you.
I would have emptied my wallet. If there was something I didn't own, I would have bought it.
Right. They've got the Godzilla magnate is here.
Yeah.
And they're not taking his money. This is just that's dumb. If I could be devil's advocate, maybe offer some.
I don't want to hear it.
Well, you said you went on the last day, right?
Okay, now. Okay, I should.
So there's
a caveat here. So the decal, I asked about it.
Yeah.
On the drink, and they said, "Well, it's the last day. We don't have any."
Right.
Fine.
Maybe this lady's just had a feel of it,
Actually, that wasn't her.
Oh.
We asked someone else because she dropped it and ran. I think because she knew I was going to ask. But yeah, I mean, the other staff were nice. In fairness.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that element of it. One of the staff did say, "Oh, if there's some merch you want, you could try your luck on the Japan Center site to see if there's something you still want." But honestly, I was so soured by it all. It was such a letdown.
That's a disappointment. Yeah, that's a shame.
So maybe if I feel a bit better about it in a week or so, maybe I'll have a look at the Japan Center site, see what I could have got you, and maybe get you something. But,
I appreciate that.
It was, I mean, my partner, she posted about it on Instagram, and Yokocho actually replied, and we're like, "Oh, what happened?" So we kind of told them what happened, and we've not heard back yet. So maybe by the next podcast episode, in the next Kaiju Corner, I can give you all an update.
Kaiju Crevice?
Oh god! Don't get in there.
Yeah, I just say like these people who work at pop-ups, they're probably like they're contracted on for like a week or two.
No. This is a place. This isn't a pop-up store.
Is it not? Oh, okay.
No, it's a ramen place. They just had a Godzilla themed menu and
so you could go back.
Decorations. Oh yeah.
Oh right, well you might get a free meal out of it if we keep complaining. But yeah,
it's what I do best.
There's no excuse for the experience you've had, honestly, because it's not your fault. You've gone there to spend some money. Let the guy spend some money.
Yeah.
But, these people who work in hospitality, they can have, sometimes they may just had a bad day. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
but it's not fair.
Not everyone's going to be 100% the whole time.
Yeah.
I'm certainly guilty of that when it comes to work. There are some days where I don't want to speak to another human being, but I have to. So, I totally get it. But it was, disappointing. It was disappointing.
Well, that's a shame.
Oh well, another dream crushed. So that's what I've got for Kaiju Corner. I was really excited. I was like, I'm going to bring this up. It's going to be great to talk about. I'm going to surprise Graham with a bit of merchandise.
Oh.
But sadly, not to be.
That's a shame.
That is a shame. So, yeah. Now, the event's over now. Did I mention that? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think that's how I got it in my head that it was a pop-up.
Yeah. So
it's a ramen cafe, but the Godzilla thing was a timed event.
Yes, exactly.
I get it.
Yeah, so the menu's over now.
Nice.
I did ask what they were doing with the posters. They were saying, they're going to send them back to the warehouse. So no poster.
They
either.
fucking didn't though, mate. They're in the dustbin outside the
probably
restaurant.
Yeah, so that's my side of Kaiju Corner. What about you?
Well, mine's a bit different, and I thought I'd speak at something because I knew you were going to bring up this ramen cafe thing, so I went for something a bit different. I've got a movie element. We were talking about the old movies. So I thought I'd talk about a new movie.
Okay.
So I'm going to try to be very light with spoilers because I'm talking about Turning Red, which is the Pixar. It's a pretty recent Pixar movie. It just came out like a couple of weeks ago at the time of recording, so it's kind of new. So I don't want to spoil it for people because if you haven't seen it, I would really, really recommend it. It's a very good movie. Basically, the premise is that it's about a young girl who starts turning into a giant red panda, and all of this is like a metaphor for her transition through puberty. And it's a very... are
we talking kaiju big?
Well, this is the thing. Thing.
Okay.
It's a very thoughtful and well-made movie, and I really, really liked it. I would recommend it to everybody. And towards the end, again, spoilers, but there is some very large kaiju-size red panda action going on.
Okay.
And I really liked it, not just because it reminded me of Godzilla, and there's a lot of, obviously, the main characters of the movie, they're Chinese, and there's a lot of Asian influence on the film. It's been made by a partially Asian creative team within Pixar.
Is it is this the first female director for a Pixar film?
I believe so.
Solely, not like the whole Brave incident.
Yeah, last one to cross the finish line at least, with a female at the helm.
That's good.
But yeah, it wears its Asian influences on its sleeve, basically. So seeing this sort of kaiju Godzilla thing in there was not, that big of a surprise, but it was like a nice, we're seeing sort of Godzilla's influence. And the reason it worked so well, in my opinion, was because they're not doing it purely superficially. Much like the way Godzilla is always best when it's allegorical or metaphorical or showing you something or presenting some kind of idea. It's when the panda gets really, really large, it's playing out for... it's a visualization of the conflict between mother and daughter, or the internal conflict that families can create when people don't listen to each other. People can harbour resentment or get pent up, and it just builds and builds and builds and becomes like this big thing. And so there's a part of that in the finale of the movie.
That's quite interesting to have that kind of, what can a kaiju represent? Does it represent nuclear war or internal conflict or, family struggles or whatever? That's interesting.
Yeah, the movie's really, really good. It's very female-centric, and I felt that taking its Asian influence and the kaiju and Godzilla and applying that to a feminine-specific problem was really, really smart. And they chose their tools wisely and executed their ideas very, very well. So yeah, I think that Turning Red is by far the best Pixar movie of the last 10 years or so. It's probably one of the better movies Disney put out for a long time. So yeah, I'd really recommend it, and has a really cool action scene at the end, so worth sticking around for.
Kaiju movie of the year.
Could be, unless Anne Hathaway's got something cooking. But well, that's my Kaiju. What was it? Corner?
Kaiju Corner?
Kaiju cushion. Yeah.
Cushion?
Yeah. My Kaiju cushion for the day.
Okay, no, that's cool. I mean, I've said to you before, I went off Pixar a long time ago.
They've been they've been going through a bad time.
Not acting like, I'm above kids' movies. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
It's more the behind the scenes.
The studio direction was not good. The movies they've been turning out have been quite cynical for a long time. So it's for a long time. It's just not sat well with me. And I find it very difficult when I see even Pixar's attached to something. I find it puts me off. Maybe this is the film to kind of pull me back in. I really think you would like it. I know that your partner's going to like it when you get around to watching it. And yeah, I think the last 2 or 3 Pixar movies that come out have been actually really, really good. Soul was great. Wasn't like their best work, but it's creeping back, and I think you could easily put Turning Red. In with the best of them. I think it's really, really good. So
excellent.
Would recommend. Great music as well. Really good soundtrack. Very funny movie.
Okay.
But I thought it was a good idea to bring up a brand new film because we're talking about the oldest Godzilla, so it ties a nice little package on this episode for you.
And puts a nice little high note on the end of the Kaiju Corner, which is that's good. Lovely. Brilliant. Okay. Wow, we've been talking for quite some time now. So shall we wrap it up here?
Yes.
Okay. So where can people find you, Graham?
Where can they find me? On the next episode of Monster Island Radio is where they'll be finding me, which we've promised to record in less than 12 months' time.
That is a promise. That's a guarantee. The Godzilla guarantee. So for me, if you want to see some of my drawings, you can follow me on Instagram. It's BenMR Hall. It's my handle. If you want to follow this podcast on Instagram, it's Monster Island Radio. And we have a Twitter, which is Monster Island RP. So because we've been inactive for the last...
Since last April, I think.
Really? I think it's to the day. The last episode we recorded was exactly 1 year ago.
Ugh.
Yeah, I know.
What are we doing?
I know. Sorry, guys.
I couldn't tell you anything I've done in the last year.
Yeah, I know, right? So I noticed like recently we had quite a few people reaching out saying, where are we? When's the next episode? And for some reason, I didn't get any of those notifications. I actually had to look back at our, videos and messages and stuff to see that people had actually asked us. So apologies for not getting back to any of you until recently.
Appreciate the interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. We will not be away this long again. It was just unfortunate timing with a lot of things happening. It happens. So, but yeah, we'll be back again. So, thanks for listening, everyone. I guess in the next episode we do, that'll be after your honeymoon, right? So you can
hopefully,
you can tell us all about it then.
Yeah, will I see King Kong where I'm going? Could do.
Let's find out.
No secrets. Maybe he'll be there. I'm gonna ask him why he wasn't at the wedding.
Yeah, might be a bit awkward.
But what is it next? Godzilla rides again? Is that
raids again?
Raids again. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I haven't seen that one before, so
neither have I.
All right.
Okay. So until the next episode, everyone.
Bye.